The biggest challenge surrounding building a railroad has always been the terrain, ever since the very beginning. Trains aren't fond of steep hills or sharp curves, meaning the route chosen must be done so quite carefully. Even then, sometimes serious engineering marvels are needed to make the route work, whether it be a bridge or a long tunnel. We've talked about how a few of the railroads developed special locomotives designed for operation in tunnels before, be it the tunnel motor that we have at the Colorado Railroad Museum, or the cab forward at the California State Railroad Museum. And with those, it's easy to understand that hot thing that spews lots of smoke inside enclosed space is not good for the thing or the crew themselves. But very recently, I got to experience exactly what that means for myself. What's up, guys? This is Heiss, and before my trip to Australia, I'd never been in the cab of a locomotive going through a tunnel before. And now I've gotten to do it several times, thanks to the folks at the Zigzag Railway and the folks at the picnic train when we ran out of Canberra. The experience was truly enlightening in ways that I didn't expect. At Zigzag, the coal-burning steam locomotive was working its ass off to go up through the tunnels, and it didn't really make much of a difference in terms of the experience and how you felt and the air quality and all that, despite smoke coming out and steam and all that. The big difference was the noise, which... However, when I went to go ride with the picnic train out of Canberra, with the oil-burning R-Class, everything was quite different. I'd been told about the tunnels, I knew that they were coming up, but I was focusing on filming and getting good shots, and the tunnels weren't a big deal. At Zigzag, it was no different. You know, maybe a little bit hotter because the enclosed space, but wasn't a big deal. The experience of going through a tunnel with a hard-working oil-burning locomotive ranks quite high on my list of most unpleasant experiences I've ever had. The fix is simpler than you think, and it's very simple and very effective. Just a wet rag over your nose and mouth, and 90%, even more than that, of that icky awfulness goes away. And that works even for a decently long tunnel. A couple of tunnels we ran through were pretty long. But that's not the only strategy that's ever been tried on a more conventional steam locomotive throughout history. Many roads actually issued gas masks, especially the Southern. There's good pictures of their gas masks that were connected to the main reservoir on the steam engine. Recall that the air brakes on the locomotive function with compressed air, therefore we have clean air on the locomotive. Why not send a pipe of that at a much reduced pressure to the engineer and fireman with a gas mask, and that way they can breathe in the tunnel. And anyone who has ever drained a main reservoir on a locomotive has probably immediately gone, ugh. Chocolate milk. I'm sure it's better than smoke inhalation in an extreme case, but the disgusting, musty, oil and water soaked air coming out of a main reservoir being what you're breathing in, imagine breathing in the worst humidity in Florida of all time and making it worse and add oil. Doesn't sound very nice, does it? It's like breathing chocolate milk through the air. Yeah. I'd take my chances with the clean water soaked rag, personally. The fact that oil-burning steam is so much worse going through a tunnel in terms of breathing quality for the crew helps explain the concept of the cab forward to me. The SP was not the only railroad that had a lot of tunnels and snow sheds and the whole mix of things. Gestures wildly at the rest of Colorado. The SP made cab forwards, but we didn't. Our engines here in Colorado burn coal, and they ran through one of the longest tunnels around. It's one of the longest in the States, and a lot of my friends always seem to think it is the longest, but it's not. That tunnel's the Moffett Tunnel, which replaced this ridiculous alignment up and over Rollins Pass, which again, hey, is it easier to build this crazy, spirally, silly railroad or punch the tunnel? Well, they tried the easy route first and realized that the tunnel would be better despite these breathing challenges that you'd come into. I'd wager that the choice in fuel is a big part of the difference and why this was possible for the DNRGW or the Denver and Salt Lake or any of those folks versus the SP, but it doesn't quite make up the entire difference because, of course, smoke is still smoke. There are countless instances of tragedies happening to crew and perhaps even more in the history of railroading when it comes to tunnels. There's legends from the South Park line with Alpine Tunnel and how crews would pass out before they made it to the other side, and hopefully they were resuscitated when they got out of the bore, but maybe not. And the same thing with Hagerman Tunnel on the Colorado Midland, where the air was so scarce because the tunnels were so high up above the Continental Divide. I mean, it was a big thing. There's also an incident on the SP where a knuckle split in half on a train pulled by a cab forward, caused the air to dump, caused the train to stall in the tunnel, everything went in emergency, and the smoke that plumed out without the train moving, even despite the stack being 100 feet back, killed the entire train crew. Worse than that was in Italy during World War II, where the Balvano train disaster happened, where it was a double-headed steam train that stalled in the tunnel due to a number of different reasons, although one of the key reasons being that there were a ton of extra people that were hitching a ride on the freight train due to the economic situation of the war. And that train disaster wins the worst tunnel disaster in history, with more than 500 people becoming victims because of smoke inhalation. That one is a whole ride that deserves its own whole story, and I helped tell it. Well, at least I've helped provide some fun color commentary, I guess, on the Well, There Is Your Problem podcast a couple months back. Link will be down in the description. Utterly horrifying and not a great situation, but I digress. Coal burners can kill in tunnels too. These days, it's the modern mechanical engineering that helps serve a lot of these really big tunnels like the Moffat or the Cascade Tunnel. Huge fans are blowing air in and clearing out the diesel exhaust, and as well, they help serve cooling the locomotives. Locomotives in the Cascade Tunnel working upgrade are actually working into a headwind, where the wind is providing fresh cooling air from those big fans and blowing all the exhaust away from the crews. You'll note that the tunnel motor we talked about, a locomotive specifically designed to work inside tunnels and stay cooled, is at a museum. And when we did the video on it, it was at the museum, and a lot of her sisters are either retired or at museums. And it's because this modern mechanical engineering marvel of big fan push air is now the reason that tunnels work out well for trains and for the crews alike. Locomotives like the tunnel motor simply not needed thanks to that kind of engineering, and as well some regulations from the National Fire Prevention Act, which also help keep tunnels clear of smoke. An interesting thing I learned after I made the tunnel motor video, though, while we're there, is that the earlier locomotives on the Denver and Rio Grande Western system were actually equipped with a special reservoir at the back of the car body that was full of water, and they had an extra temp switch to control it, and when that temp switch triggered, it would dump main reservoir pressure air in the top of the reservoir, and that would force water at high pressure out several nozzles down the lengths of the radiators, acting like a really early primitive swamp cooler. And that helped keep the early locomotives, the Streamliners and the Jeep 30s and things like that, cool in these big tunnels that we had. It was a wonderful solution, but required more maintenance than what the tunnel motors needed. Modern day train crews that deal with bigger tunnels are actually equipped with emergency breathing apparatuses, and apparently down the lengths of the tunnel bores, well, there's extra air tanks for them to pick up, just in case the train stalls in the tunnel. The tunnel's well equipped now for a train that's operating through it to keep the locomotives cool and the crew alive and breathing. But if they separate the train, knuckle breaks, something like that, train dumps in the tunnel, and there's no way to escape that amount of buildup right where they're at, they're given these emergency things in case they have to walk out the tunnel. And that's all designed to prevent kind of that same thing that happened with the SP back in the day with the cab forward. The heritage crews on steam trains these days, though, well, either it's a short enough tunnel that you don't even worry about it, most tunnels that are in tourist service these days aren't really a big deal. Or you've got a nice coal-burning engine and a short enough tunnel, it's not a huge deal like Zigzag. Or you've got a rag and a bucket of water at the ready, and you will just be fine. Anyways, guys, I hope you learned something from this one. Lord knows I did. It was so surprising to feel the difference between a coal burner and an oil burner, and a decently similar length of tunnel working about the same amount of hardness to them. And I hope you guys also enjoyed the video as well. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you all next time.